under-taught part of the golf swing is what you do beforehand. Not necessarily the pre-shot routine, but the waggle. And the waggle is something that Ben Hogan wrote about extensively in 5 lessons. And it's one of the good parts, the great parts of that book. Now, I've taught a waggle for my whole life in teaching. And the waggle is something you do to loosen up the hands, basically, before you take the golf swing. It's also an indication of the type of shot you're going to hit. So I'm going to show you the waggle that I was taught as a teenager from a really great player in the Northwest, Al Mengert, who played the PGA Tour for 20 years. He was really a fine player. And he showed me, he called it the Ben Hogan and Sam Snead waggle, which was really correct. And that was the waggle when you are set up over the golf ball, and then you pick the club up above the ball, you move it in front of the ball, and then away from the ball. So it's up, over, back, down. Up, over, back, down. Now that's the basic waggle that Ben Hogan talks about in his book. But I wanted to take a little deeper dive into what Hogan did and what some other waggles are, because I think it's such a critical part, so important to your pre-shot routine before you take the golf club away. So again, let me talk about the Hogan waggle. He didn't do it the same way all the time. If he wanted to hit a draw or a hook, he would do this waggle where he'd go over and then a little more to the inside and back. Up, over, inside, and back. If he wanted to hit a fade, he would orient his body more to the left, and then his waggle would be the same thing, out more toward the outside. And that would pre-set up the shot he wanted to hit. Now, when you watch Hogan really closely and see what happens with his waggle, it's quite different than what he did with his real takeaway. In his waggle, he basically just moves the hands, but there's also an interesting move with the left arm. As he picks the club up and goes forward and then cocks the club back, his left arm actually goes toward the target. Now that is a really interesting thing. He doesn't talk about that, but it does show you that he's presetting that wrist and the left arm in front of that golf club. And that's where we want to be when we strike the golf ball, with the shaft leaning forward. Now, the waggle is not done with the whole body or a lot of movement here. It is mostly just the wrist joints and the setting of the golf club, like that. And that activates your brain into your hands, and it gives you a great feeling of the path and the lead of the hands into impact. So many people I teach come into impact like this, the higher handicaps. They have a little early throw. They do also tend to just stand over the golf ball with no waggle, and they get tight. And this is such an important part, such an interesting thing, is this movements with the hands and the wrists before you take the club away. Now I'm going to add in just a little bit. I'm not telling you to freeze to the ground and just do this. You still can have a little bit of movement in your feet prior to hitting the golf ball for sure. And when you do the waggle, this is really important, that you don't freeze to the ground either. Now, when you waggle, you can pick the club up and look at your target and waggle, because the ball's not going anywhere. As long as you've got the club above the ground, you're safe. You can waggle the club over the ground. I want to talk to you about some interesting waggles. One of my favorite waggles was done by Jason Duffner, the PGA champion, great player on the PGA Tour, and he had a fast waggle, and it was all wrists. And he would waggle the club like this. Let me get it the right speed, about like that. And then he'd put the club down and hit the ball. Now I asked Jason, how many waggles do you do with an iron and a driver? And he said, well, it's different. He said, I have more waggles with my driver. I might do 9 to 12 waggles with my driver. That's kind of an astounding number of of movements over, and then 3 or 4 with an iron. So we're talking, let's go 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's an astonishing amount of movements over the ball before you hit, but you can see that that kind of motion really loosens up your wrists. And I'm sure that's what Jason was trying to do, and it's been so successful for him. Now, other players like Lexi Thompson I worked with for many, many years, she does a waggle where she goes back here and brings the club back down. Here and brings the club back down. So does Justin Thomas. So does Ricky Fowler. So they do a big waggle, and part of their waggle is they even look over, or Justin Thomas will look over at his golf club to see that it's in the right position and then bring it back. Ricky Fowler, I know, has kind of fought a backswing where he maybe felt like he took it too far outside. So his waggle was to go inside a little more and feel it here. So it's a pre-swing movement to fix a mistake in your backswing as well. Those guys do it that way, and that's why Lexi does it that way too, to get a feeling of the flow of the arms. Other waggles that I've loved, I've played with Johnny Miller when he was at the height of his career, one of the greatest ball strikers in the history of golf for the time that he played. But Johnny did this waggle where he just picked the club up and put it back down. And you can see it from that back camera where I'm really pulling the elbows into me this way. And what that does, automatically loosens your arms. Tension kills the golf swing. That's like a motto of my golf swing that I've taught to my teachers forever, and I tell it to students all the time. Once you freeze over the ball, once your arms get super tight, it's all over. So the waggle, remember, is something that you can do before you take the golf club away. I like to use it for the type of shot I'm going to hit. I also might use it as a little corrective movement, even on the little one that I do. If I'm trying to hook it, I might feel like I take that club a little more shut going back. If I'm trying to hit a high, soft shot, I might do it this way, up, over, with a little more open club face. And I preset in the shot that I'm trying to hit. Watch the greatest players in the world. Watch the different waggles that they have. You don't have to waggle it the way I showed you right here, the several ways I showed you. You might have your own waggle, but it should be something that flows into your golf swing, that helps you take the club away better and gives you a sense of the type of shot you're trying to hit. So remember, the waggle, very undertaught. It's a really important part of becoming a better player.